Broadcasting across California, California's only statewide political show. You're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michaelson. This week, the issue is voting. Millions of you have already voted, including the governor of California, who voted in Sacramento this week. He also visited the largest voting center in Los Angeles, Dodger Stadium, home of the 2020 World Series champions. That's where we spoke exclusively. Governor, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Good to be with you.
Nice to see you. First off, it's cool to be here at Dodger Stadium, right?
And especially at this moment, right?
Yeah.
Just days after this incredible. What a year for LA.
I know. It's
Lakers, Dodgers, and look, let's be honest, I want full disclosure, former mayor of San Francisco.
Right.
So it says, I don't know what it says. Maybe I'm in trouble if I go back home.
What does it feel like being here, seeing the Dodger World Championship?
No, I'm just happy. You know what's great is just how happy everybody was after the Lakers won, after the Dodgers. In politics, you can't legislate spirit and pride, and that's what sports does. It brings people together at a time we're so desperate to have something in common as opposed to an election that divides all of us.
Right.
So I think it's just happened at the right time, and I couldn't be more happy.
So let's talk for a moment about the big issue that brings you here, which is voting.
Yeah.
People now have a choice. Yeah. What does California look like if we have a Trump-Pence administration versus a Biden-Harris administration? What specifically does that mean for you and for this state?
Well, it's more of the same. We're involved in over 100 lawsuits against the Trump administration, almost 60 in the environmental space. So we're consistently playing defense, all the headwinds coming out of Washington, D.C. And while we've established a good working relationship, not a sparring one on issues of wildfires and on COVID, the reality is that's tenuous at best. A Biden administration, no headwinds, tailwinds. Ability to address those lawsuits and an agenda that aligns with the values of the state so we can accelerate our efforts on homelessness, on housing, get back to those pre-pandemic issues that are festering in the state that have to be addressed.
Here at Dodger Stadium, people are voting. You just observed some of that. People are voting at all these big centers all over the place. Yeah. You voted at one of them this week in Sacramento. But there's still folks that feel like there are too many ballots that were mailed out. There's a lot of problems with that. What do you say to people that are concerned about voting in California? Maybe it's been made too easy.
Yeah, I don't know there's such a thing as making too easy. To participate in the democratic process, to make it easy by providing choices and opportunities that otherwise didn't exist. Why restrict the franchise when you can expand it? And again, we send out ballots to everybody that was an active registered voter. And so you have the choice to send it in, or you have the choice to bring it in, or you have the choice to do what you traditionally did, and that's go to your polling place or one of these iconic facilities that have opened up. And that's the way it should be. We want more people participating, not less. And so I don't, look, I've been in this business long enough to know exactly what's going on in terms of the manipulation of the vote by mail and absentee ballots. But California's been doing that. We've been doing absentee ballots disproportionately growing every single year. We know how to do it. We track each ballot. There's real veracity in the process. There's no real fraud. And we're going to make sure of that in this election.
Let's talk for a moment about COVID. Part of the reason that we look around here and we see cardboard cutouts in the stands instead of actual people is because of coronavirus. It couldn't play the World Series here in LA because of that. This week you toured a lab where they're going to have 150,000 tests a day, which is some progress on that front. But there's still so many Californians that want to see more progress and that feel like they're being too restrictive, especially when it comes to issues like schools that say, look, the science says young kids should be allowed to get out there in schools or use sports or other issues like that. What do you say to people that say it's time to open up more?
I totally get it. I got 4 kids myself. I want them back in school. The social-emotional learning, it's incredibly challenging. My oldest is 11. How we get the distance learning right, it's almost impossible, particularly for the younger kids. So we want to get them back, but we've got to do it safely. And the worst thing is to get them back and then have everybody start all over because we saw the background rate, we saw the case rates go back up. Here's the good news. California has gotten our positivity rate down to around 3%, depending on the 7-day, 3.2, 14-day, 3%. It's outperforming most of the rest of the country. Here's the bad news. That number has trended up in the last couple weeks. And I fear what's happened. You saw just a few days ago, 24 states had record number of cases on their 7-day positivity. You're seeing in the UK, Germany, in France and Paris, they just shut down Disneyland.
Right.
We don't want the fits and starts. We want a sustainable solution. And so we're driven by one thing, data, not by political decisions. We have a tiered status, and the transmission rate The case rate will determine how and when we open. 7 counties last week moved to less restrictive tiers. We are moving in the right direction.
There's some folks that might say, look, you guys predicted that the hospitalizations were going to go way up, and then they didn't go way up, so that's the same data that's driving your decisions. What do you say to some of those critics?
I'd say take a look at El Paso right now in Texas, and the fact that they're putting up the temporary tents. Take a look at North Dakota, and you've seen rates not in the double digits, but 30-40% positivity rates. It's jaw-dropping. The fact is, we're going into the winter months. The fact is, that means people going back inside. We're having the holidays together, which means you're going to be mixing likely outside your household. We're going into flu season, respiratory issues with cold and flu. So you have this twin pandemic challenge that we have to address, I think, in a very sober manner. So we're making progress. Vast majority of the state is in less restrictive tiers. We want to be vigilant, and we don't want to go too far only to fall 3 steps back.
I got a big picture question about the job itself. Recently, I talked with Governor Brown, Jerry Brown, and he said,
Newsom has been dealt a very tough hand. I had a good hand.
I remember when I talked to you the week of your inauguration, I said, is it worth it, all this work? Is it worth it?
So far, day 4, it better be worth it. That was a long 3-year journey. You were on it for a good portion of that.
But you are now dealing with, COVID and record wildfires and social injustice all at the same time. How do you deal with that? How do you prioritize? How do you go through every day?
No, there's an intensity, but at the same time, there's a routinization in terms of the cadence. The reality is there's no time away from dealing with, as you say, all these things stacked on top of each other, and including, by the way, just the COVID-induced recession and the budgetary impacts that has had. But look, at the end of the day, it's California. I mean, there's no state in America, no state in the world like this state. And I'm proud of this state, proud of its resiliency, our capacity to weather this. And I'm 5th generation California. I give a damn about this, but I get very personal when I hear people, the exodus out of the state, people are leaving. Honestly, I take that very personally, and I recognize the challenges we have. I get it. I get the cost of living is too high. I get the homeless issue is still a big crisis. I'm a small business person. I don't think I understand the stresses not being able to open. I know them intimately. And so I'm sensitized to that, and that gives me a sense of responsibility and an obligation to do more and better every single day, and that's the best I can do.
If Senator Harris becomes Vice President Harris, then all of a sudden it's up to you to pick her successor.
I'm curious if anybody has already started to pitch themselves as a replacement to you.
Well, you may be the only one that hasn't, unless you just did. And that is only slight exaggeration.
So
I'll add Fernando Valenzuela. We just hung out with him. He didn't mention it, which was a breakthrough. The two of you.
We saw the Secretary of State. He's somebody that is considered for that. How is that going? What's the thought process? And are more people lobbing their names in there?
No, honestly, there's not a book because no one would read it. But there's certainly a blog I can write about the interesting folks that have had no problem calling directly and saying, I absolutely am the right person. And I say the same thing, and it's a mantra, but it's just factually true. I can't get my arms around this. Not with 4.2 million acres that have burned, not with addressing the issue of these tiers and why there are cardboard cutouts and not fans at Dodger Stadium. I mean, those stresses are serious enough. The stress of having to choose between a lot of friends, to choose between quality candidates, and the fact that whoever you pick, there are going to be a lot of people that are upset, disappointed that it wasn't this or that. I don't even want to get my arms around that until I have the privilege of having to make that decision, and we'll see next week.
By the way, if you're offering, I'll take it.
so that leaves Fernando as the only guy who hasn't asked.
It's good. And just lastly, we're here at Dodger Stadium. You grew up a fan of that other team. A lot of people may not know that you were a baseball.
You don't even use the name?
You
say the other team? Is that the way Dodger fans are?
The San Francisco Giants. Sometimes they use it. Sometimes there's an F word in the middle of that in these stands. But we don't need to say that on TV.
This is not. Look, I'm wearing Dodger blue.
Yeah.
I'm in Dodger Stadium. I was hanging out with Fernando. But I'm just saying. Okay, I'm doing my job.
Well, a lot of people may not know that you were a baseball player. You played at Santa Clara until you blew out your arm. Some people thought you might be a major league player yourself.
No, it's my passion. I love baseball.
What's it like being here, seeing this, being a fan, and interacting with somebody like Fernando Valenzuela?
Fernando. I mean, that's my. I grew up, and he was a phenom, not just on the field, but off the field. Completely. I think it was Orson Welles who said, "You don't want to give people what you think they want. You want to give them what they never thought was possible." That was Fernando. And here, at this iconic stadium where been on the other side with those Giants rivalries. But it's so much fun. That energy is fabulous. And obviously being a governor, the pride that comes from seeing smiling faces, people socially distancedly high-fiving each other. And, it's a special time. And it's, by the way, let's just be honest, special time down here in LA, not just for the 2 championships, but all these new venues that have come up, the soccer venues and what Stan has done out there at SoFi Stadium. It's really a remarkable time. So when people say best days in California are behind us, there couldn't be more wrong. Enormous amount of investment, great energy. We'll get through this. It's going to be a tough few months, but we're going to get through it with the spirit and pride that brought everybody together with this World Series win.
Governor Newsom, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Our thanks to Governor Newsom. Up next, our panel of presidential campaign strategists. But first, as a Dodger fan since birth, a moment to pay tribute to the boys in blue. The Dodgers capturing their first World Series title in 32 years. And like Randy Newman, I love LA.
Too many among us spend more time shouting than listening.
We are going to win 4 more years.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump making their closing arguments in the final days of the campaign with the race down to the wire. We are bringing in the big dogs this week. All 3 of our guests right here have actually helped to run presidential campaigns. Let's meet them. Bob Shrum is the co-director of the USC Center for the Political Future with our other guest this week, Mike Murphy. He was a top advisor to John Kerry, Al Gore, Ted Kennedy, and so many others over decades in politics. Mike Murphy advised Republicans for his whole career, including Senator John McCain. Now he's one of the leaders of Republican Voters Against Trump. He's also the co-host of Hacks on Tap, one of my favorite podcasts, which features David Axelrod and Robert Gibbs as well. Listen to it. Rick Gates is joining us for the first time. He was the deputy campaign manager of the Trump campaign in 2016. He cooperated in the Robert Mueller probe. He talks about all of that in his book, Wicked Game, an insider's story on how Trump won, Mueller failed, and America lost. Welcome all with different perspectives. We're very interested to see what everybody has to say. Rick, though, since you're new to the show, let's begin with you. We see a lot of polls that show Biden is ahead, but we saw something like that in 2016 as well when you were helping to run the Trump campaign. Where do you see the state of this race a few days out?
Alex, I think the polls are off. I think they were off in 2016. I think they're off today. The race is going to tighten considerably, and I think the aspects of some of the things in 2016, like the Trump factor, which we found to be that kind of silent Trump vote, had such a huge impact. And I think it's going to be even more of an impact in 2020.
We run the USC Dornsife Daybreak poll, 6,000 people on the panel. Rick may remember it was the poll that Donald Trump liked to quote in 2016 because it said he had a chance to win. So we went out and we looked for shy Trump voters. We found a few of them. We also found a few shy Biden voters, especially among blue-collar, non-college educated women who are not going to sit there and tell a pollster on the phone that they're thinking about voting for Biden. So I think that with over 80 million ballots already cast, with the polls being pretty reliable, with Trump conducting rallies that the data suggests are actually turning people off, that Biden is in a good position. Doesn't mean Trump can't win. Doesn't mean we can't have an upset. We did in 2016.
Well, we're doing the hedge report here. I'll tell you where I think the race is. Get a fork. Trump is done. He's going to lose Florida. Florida's going to report its absentee ballot fast, so we're going to know on election night. There will be angry plates full of meatloaf spinning across the White House dining room. Donald Trump is in big trouble. He's had bad polling numbers for 4 years. COVID made it worse. He's going to lose my home state of Michigan, which he won before. He's toast in Wisconsin, which he won before. He is behind, though it's closer in Pennsylvania. He might win Georgia, a Republican bellwether state. He might win Ohio. He's playing pure defense, and he's going to lose Florida. And he's broke. He's got barely any campaign left other than rallies, which are more about his ego than reality.
Hey, Rick, do you think we got to beware of flying meatloaf on election night?
No, I'm not worried about flying meatloaf at all, and there'll be plenty of Diet Coke to go around as well. I think that, what Mike says, you go back, I think he said it, in 2016, data is dead. And data, caused a lot of problems for a lot of people in 2016. And clearly it's doing the same now. I mean, you have a lot of new dynamics in 2020 that are going to play a role, like the early voting numbers. I think it's important to point out two things with the early voting. The numbers have increased tremendously, but if you actually go into the data and look, just because a Democrat receives a ballot or a Republican receives a ballot, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the person that they vote for. So again, I mean, we're going by trends and historical information, but there's a lot of opportunity here for people to change their vote differently, or do whatever they can. And I do agree with the point that this election is going to come down to vote. Whoever gets out the most votes on Election Day is going to win this, no question.
All right, up next, we're going to have more with our panel. What do these strategists make of the very different strategies employed by the candidates? But first, a moment of levity. Trending on YouTube this week, this rap from Epic Rap Battles.
Trump, you're fired. Ain't nothing gonna beat me. No person, woman, man, camera, TV.
Donald Trump and Joe Biden are very different people who have chosen completely different strategies for this campaign. Biden showing caution with some socially distant events where he doesn't engage in many controversies. The president doing the opposite, big crowds, rallies, constantly making news. But what's a better approach to actually win? Let's talk about that with our panel this week. They have all been in the room where it happens as decisions like that are made. Bob Shrum, Mike Murphy, Rick Gates have all helped to run presidential campaigns. Mike, let's start with you. What do you make of the differences in the strategies? Because the Trump people would say, look, he's working harder, he's doing more events, he's out there working where Biden isn't.
Well, one, Trump's out of money, so he needs earned media. Two, he has a psychological need for the rallies. I don't think they're helping him. I think they're hurting him. We're getting pounded to death with Trump, and the country has shown a lot of Trump fatigue, which is part of Biden's theme. Biden's running as a guy who can do a lot better on handling COVID. So he's running, the optics are not as good, but the message is I'm responsible. Well, Trump, most of the coverage of his rallies begins with the phrase trailing in the polls and ends with super spreader. So I think it just reinforces Biden's message on COVID. But Trump's got nothing else he can do because he's broke. The campaign is broke.
Yeah, I think first of all, to Mike's point on money, look, we had no money in 2016. We were, running on a very, very small budget, and I thought we did it very effectively. What we were able to do in that election is really spread a lot of it around digital advertising and really getting to kind of a methodology where it targeted voters in ways differently than previous election cycles.
The Trump narrative changes all the time. A few months ago, the now deposed campaign manager said, we're going to have $1 billion. We're going to have the Death Star. I think he forgot, by the way, that in the movie, the Death Star actually gets blown up in the end. And that's what happened here. The Trump campaign spent $800 million before the Republican convention. So it's not on television with nearly the weight that Biden is, nearly the weight that the other Democratic committees are. And if you put all the Republican buys together and all the Democratic buys and social media and television, Trump is being substantially outspent.
Rick, I'm interested. I know all three of you have been in the room where it happens in these big moments. What was it like 2016? In that room, you find out that Donald Trump is going to be the next president.
I mean, look, everybody, I think, was surprised that night simply because nobody believed that the race was going to be called, in the wee hours of the morning. But I mean, it put a lot of people, I think, at unease, realizing that he was able to communicate his message directly to the people. So I hear what Bob's saying, but a lot of what Donald Trump has been able to do in 2020 is what worked for him in 2016. I mean, you're campaigning against a guy who has boundless, endless energy, and clearly Joe Biden does not. I mean, hopefully by the end of the cycle here, Joe Biden will be able to remember what office he's running for. And I think that'll give comfort to the American people that at least they're going to elect somebody that knows what office he's in.
Let's be serious, Rick. Come on. That's preposterous.
Yeah, let's be honest.
I'm trying to do some
Bob,
analysis.
He said it multiple times. I mean, we could talk about the mental gaps. It is an issue. The American people are aware of it. I mean, we're not making this up. It happens.
And in our polling, in our USC polling, which used to be quoted by Trump all the time, people think Biden is more mentally and physically fit to be president than they do Trump is.
What's a pro tip of something to watch for, Rick?
Watch for, when they show the pictures at election headquarters, you got to get a sense of the mood and the atmosphere of each campaign.
Don't freak out when the early returns that the networks start using show Trump in the lead. That's election day vote. Keep an eye on bellwether counties.
Look at the crowds, wait for the results, but don't listen to the spin from either side, because both sides are going to go out there and try to spin it as a done deal.
Unless, of course, that spin comes from Bob Shrum, Mike Murphy, or Rick Gates, who will all be busy giving spin on election night. Thanks to our panel. It's great talking with all of you. I have a final word when we come back, but before we say goodbye to this panel, Bob, I want to play something from your favorite musical artist. So Ariana Grande has some new music. Playing the part of the president in her newest music video, Promises. It is trending this week. Maybe a preview of 2024. Maybe some work for you guys. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. We'll be right back. More of the issue. A last word about voting. In 2016, I was covering the Clinton campaign in Philadelphia on the final night of the campaign. Everyone thought they were going to win. They literally popped champagne on the campaign plane. Then the next night, I was at their headquarters in New York as Donald Trump shocked the world. The next day, I met hundreds of protesters outside Trump Tower, and so many of them told me they didn't vote because they didn't think they needed to. Same thing when I spoke with folks at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. Many people simply didn't vote. And then they regretted it, big time. Donald Trump has fundamentally changed so many aspects of American life, including appointing 3 Supreme Court justices for life. There's a lot of you who think that he is making America great again, and many of you who are horrified by him. But now is your chance to say something about it. Either way, don't wake up on November 4th and think, if only I said something. Marching on the streets on November 4th really doesn't do much, but voting on November 3rd can change our world. In that spirit, we're playing the first ever song we ever played here on The Issue Is, Say Something by Justin Timberlake and Chris Stapleton. I'm Elex Michaelson. Thanks for watching, and thanks for voting.
I can't help myself.